I was completely disappointed. I was distraught by the decision to reinstate him in the first place. Utterly ridiculous. Never should have happened. If there is ever a point in a game, in society, in life, to not even make an example, but to really apply a legitimate decision in firing someone, this was the time. This was the time to prove that football games, wins and losses do not mean more than life, and they failed. Yes, they made up for it on Wednesday to a degree, so to an extent I am pleased, but I'm still appalled that he was reinstated in the first place.
Yeah, Acho, appalled is the perfect word to use because I sit on the board of trustees for University of Miami, and the first thing we always worry about is, are we creating a culture that kids want to go to? Are we creating a culture that the students can thrive in? Can they grow? Can they develop? And to keep him and reinstate him, that is the complete opposite of what you'd be doing for that football program. I don't understand what would make them decide, yes, we want to reinstate this guy to do what? What is going to happen with that football program, keeping him there, knowing that he had a kid die on his watch? Completely appalled. I agree with you, Acho.
And JV, you hit the nail on the head. The question you have to ask yourself is, for what? It's not even as if they tried to, even though this would be illegitimate, it's not even as if they tried to reinstate Durkin because he is some sort of renowned, phenomenal, all-time winningest coach in football history. And even if he was, that still wouldn't be legitimate. But at the point in which he's an average coach, coaching thus far what has been an average ball club, it really just makes no sense. It was embarrassing for Maryland to make that decision, and they deserved all public scrutiny that they got and will continue to get because that decision was completely and utterly embarrassing. There's no place for that in society, let alone the game of football.
I couldn't agree more, Acho. And what I loved, not only the student athletes protesting, but the students themselves much more aware, much more conscious of what's going on in that university and not putting up with the poor decisions that the board made.
You do wonder just how much more radioactive DJ Durkin becomes in terms of where he goes next. He became, over the last 24 hours, not just the decision that was made, but how it was handled and the reaction to it. So we'll see what happens there. But, guys, on the player perspective, there are reports out there about a player altercation, perhaps, there at Maryland after practice. You've got some guys that are probably happy with this decision, some guys that aren't. Jonathan, as a former player yourself, how do you move forward inside that locker room?
It's hard to understand why the players would be fighting. I don't know the details of it. I know that being a captain for 3 years at the University of Miami, we would have had a team meeting and we would have said we're going to come together as they did under Matt Canada. So it is outside of their control to hire or fire coaches, but it is within their control of how they're going to respond to whoever is the head coach. So I applaud the teammates that said we're going to respond by either not playing, by walking out, not practicing, and having more leaders within that team saying this is what we're going to do, because that's what we would have done. There would have been no way that he would have been the head coach again. It would have been us out the door and you guys, board, figure out who's going to be our head coach, because it's not going to be him.
First things first, student athletes, understand just how much power you have. Let's go back to 2015 at Missouri when 30 black athletes said they were not going to play until the acting president, Tim Wolf, I believe his name was, were to resign. Well, within 72 hours, there was his resignation. Let's fast forward now to 2018 at Maryland. Yes, there was a Twitter uproar. There was public uproar, but the student athletes said, you know what? We're not going to stand for this. At least the majority of student athletes did, and the student body followed suit. I read the student body president met with the president of the university and said, no can do, this isn't going to fly. Student athletes realize how much power you have. And then to answer your question, ultimately, when you think about things, the players, I could not look DJ Durkin in the eye if he were to walk in and give me a team meeting. I'm telling you that right now, Vilma. If he walked in and I'm sitting reclined in one of my seats like you do on team meeting days, and in walks his head coach, I'm walking out as he walks in. So I think from here you have to rally around each other as a team, as a unit, as the 88 or so scholarship players and the 104 or so athletes, and figure out how to win ball games from here. Because right now you just got to focus on ball and try to eliminate some of the distractions.
And the first ball game up for Maryland is a game against Michigan State this weekend. Let's focus on another game this weekend, a little more sizable, more college football playoff implications for this one. Number 1 Alabama taking on number 3 LSU. It's our Wendy's Fresh Look here on College Football Live. Take a look at the last 7 meetings between Alabama and LSU. The Tide has won all 7 of those, allowing no more than 17 points in any of those games with 2 shutouts. That includes the national championship game to finish the 2011 season, a 21-zip Bama victory. I'm going to ask you the toughest question you've been asked all week. Emmanuel, we'll start with you. Where is Alabama vulnerable?
I could lie to you and try to make up an answer, pull an answer out of my butt, but the honest answer is we don't know. We don't know because we haven't seen it. Sure, they've given up a couple, I think, 17, 20-plus point games. Sure, but Tua's been benched in the third quarter typically because they're up by so much. I can't say they're vulnerable on offense. I cannot say that they're vulnerable on defense. To be totally honest, we don't know. But the only comparison I will draw, we didn't know Georgia was vulnerable because before they played LSU. By the time they played LSU, what was typically a 60-yard gain turned into a 2-yard gain. So I think we will see some very similar instances with this Alabama LSU team because Alabama hasn't seen LSU speed, strength, and tenacity yet.
Ooh, Acho, I don't know, man. There's always a vulnerability. I mean, that's what makes the great players, they go ahead and dissect the good players because I can see vulnerabilities in the Alabama defense. I see when they get confused on shifts and motions. When you run 2 players through their zones, if they're in zone coverage, they get confused. Take a look at a little bit at the Mizzou offense. Unfortunately, Mizzou's defense wasn't good enough to keep up, but Mizzou had a good game plan. Unfortunately, the game got out of whack and they couldn't withstand it, but they as in LSU, they can do a lot of the things similar to Mizzou if they so choose. The problem is that LSU's offense has been so boring over the past 7 years. That's why you see the 12 to 13 points a game, because they have to be more creative. Athletes versus athletes, it's a wash. Now you have to get creative as a coach and figure out how to put your athletes in the best position to make plays.
I've got a weakness for you. Bama's missed 4 field goals inside of 40 yards. Anyone buying that? I mean, they don't kick any field goals. That's the problem. They're getting touchdowns.
I'm not buying
field goals here. Yeah. This is obviously the most losable game for Alabama in the regular season. If Alabama, if they had a choice, if they're going to finish with a loss somewhere, Emmanuel, we'll start with you. Would it be better for Alabama to lose this game against LSU or to win this game, win out in the regular season, but lose the SEC championship game?
I say this, lose the SEC championship game. You never want to lose late. I understand that train of thought. That's usually the bandwagon I am on. But you have to play in your championship game, your conference championship game, and you'll get a little bit more grace if you lose a championship game as opposed to a rivalry game early November. So if I'm Alabama, lose the championship game if I have to lose one. But again, it's Alabama. Are they really going to lose one?
I agree with you, Acho. Lose late in the SEC championship game, but for a different reason. If Alabama loses to LSU, they will have no signature win this entire season. It doesn't matter if they roll on Auburn by 50 points. When it comes down to the committee looking at their resume versus other one-loss teams, they're going to say, what has Alabama done? They've looked good versus terrible opponents, and they look poor versus a good opponent. So they need this victory to have a signature win so that they can have something on the resume that people can talk about to get them in the playoffs.
That's it. You hit it right there. We haven't seen a team lose in a conference championship game and make it to the college football playoff. However, you look at that schedule, Bama getting a feather in the cap, beating LSU at night in Death Valley, where dreams go to die. Theirs would go to live. That would be a good thing for Alabama. So we've got LSU at 3. We've got Notre Dame at 4. Let's take a look now at one final team vote brought to you by Dr. Pepper. America believes Notre Dame should be in that number 4 spot. They are capturing 44% 28% of the vote. Again, Bama, Clemson, LSU, Notre Dame there at 4. After this weekend, we are guaranteed to see a shakeup there in that top 4 with a top 3 matchup between LSU and the Tide. Up next here on College Football Live, much more to get to, including the top 4. Again, as we said, there's going to be a shakeup. If Chalk holds in the top 6, though, which team should enter the top 4? We're going maize and blue, or we're going red and black. Those teams involved in 2 of the 4 top 20 matchups this weekend. Perhaps the best weekend in the history of Western civilization. It's Statement Saturday. Penn State takes on Michigan. And then undefeated Notre Dame, number 3 in all the land, visits Northwestern. 7:15 Eastern, 4:15 Pacific. Both games on ESPN and live on the
official drink of Fansville.
Let's take a look at our Dr. Pepper Championship Drive Game of the Week preview. Michigan, 5th in the college football playoff rankings, hosts 14th ranked Penn State. Michigan boasts the top total defense in the FBS and will try to avenge last year's 29-point loss to the Nittany Lions as the revenge tour continues in Ann Arbor. That's where we begin with 4 downs. Manuel Acho, Jonathan Vilma, I'm Matt Schick. Our first down, let's assume the favored teams win this week. Michigan beats Penn State. Georgia beats Kentucky. Emmanuel, who slides up into that 4th spot?
I think you have to give it to Georgia because their one loss is to a team in LSU that's obviously a really good team. You got to give it to Georgia. They're beating a Kentucky team that's been dominant. If Georgia can beat Kentucky after rolling over Florida, I personally got to rock with the Bulldogs.
Man, Acho, you're discrediting Michigan because they lost to Notre Dame, who's the number 3 team in the country. So I would take Michigan over Georgia because Michigan, frankly, has looked better than Georgia. Forget the losses. Let's talk about everything being equal. The thing I love about the committee is the eye test. Who has looked better in their wins? And it's been Michigan defensively. Michigan in the run game has definitely looked better than Georgia.
Vilma's not entirely wrong, so that's a first. I can't be mad if you put Michigan in there either.
I love how you're saying you're wrong, but you just didn't want to say that. That's cool, though.
Yeah.
That's cool.
You can sense there just wasn't a conviction in Acho's argument. As soon as you started talking, Jonathan, he's like, I wish I'd done that. You're right. You can just feel
exactly.
it. You can just feel it right there. Never a better compliment than you're not entirely wrong here on College Football Live. All right, let's go to second down here. The Football Power Index is giving Northwestern a 28% chance of beating Notre Dame on the home field. Jonathan, you going higher or lower for Northwestern 28%?
I'm going lower. I would put it at 20%. And I'm looking at the combination of Ian Book and Dexter Williams on the offensive side for Notre Dame. They're frankly too much for Northwestern. I know Northwestern's had these comeback wins. They keep it close, but there's too much offense, too much firepower for Notre Dame. I mean, you look at the first game with Wimbush, and it was low scoring ever since Ian Book has been there. They have been ripping off points. And Dexter Williams coming back is too much.
I really agree. Ian Book has been dominant. Dexter Williams is a beast. But Northwestern, it's weird to say the best 3-loss team in the country. Outside of that first loss, their second 2 losses were close, and they won their last 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. This Northwestern team is a good football team, a team that a lot of people are sleeping on, but the quarterback who you see there is elusive. If you give him space in the pocket, he can make all the throws. I give Northwestern a 40% chance to pull off this upset.
Northwestern is 0-13 all-time as a home dog against top 5 teams dating back to 1983. All right, let's go to third down now. West Virginia. That means you're saying there's not a chance. You're probably closer to 20 than 40. We'll put it that way. Third down, West Virginia goes to Austin this weekend. Manuel, what are the chances you give West Virginia not only to beat Texas, but to win the Big 12?
Start of the season, I thought West Virginia was going to win the Big 12. Now, halfway through the season, I'm not sure. Beating Texas will be difficult. The Texas defensive backs have a chip on their shoulder, which they should. They have to come out and play well. It's at home. I think Texas will play well. I actually think Texas will win this ball game. But remember, everything's on the line for West Virginia in the last game of the season. They host Oklahoma, and that's going to be the deciding factor between them going to the Big 12 championship. So for them, it's not so much about this game. They have just as big a game coming up. If Will Grier gets back on a roll, they can pull it off.
Wait, so Acho, are you saying they can win the Big 12 or they can't?
Anything is possible. They can do it. But if I'm a betting man, Vilma, which I'm not, I don't like them to win it anymore.
Okay, because I'm saying they cannot, and it's because of Will Grier. Will Grier, he'll give you 3 touchdowns or 3 picks. I don't know which Will Grier is going to come out versus Oklahoma, so it's going to be on them, and I'd say he can't do it.
All right, I don't think we settled anything there. Let's, by the way, West Virginia, a 16% chance to win the Big 12. That's second behind Oklahoma, 60%. That's according to our Football Power Index. All right, let's go to fourth down tonight. ESPN, we've got number 12, UCF, facing Temple. Mackenzie Milton, by the way, is a game-time decision. Heisman hopeful there. Jonathan, does UCF have a path to the college football playoff?
Whew. It is a very, very difficult path. I looked at the teams ahead of them. You would need 2 losses, not 1, 2 more losses for Michigan, for Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Washington State, for LSU. And I said that there's no way Bama's going to lose 2. There's no way Clemson's going to lose 2. And then they can squabble with Notre Dame for the 3 and 4 spot. So basically, there is a chance some way in that math if someone wants to do the math, but it is ridiculously hard for UCF to make the playoff.
It's hard, but Vilma, track with me. You count in Alabama, we can count in Clemson. But if Michigan loses this week, then beats Ohio State, you knock both those teams out. West Virginia loses this week, beats Oklahoma. Those are 2-loss teams. You knock them out. Notre Dame with 1 loss versus UCF, who's been undefeated for 2 straight years. UCF might have an argument. Georgia, if they take a loss this week to Kentucky, but Kentucky loses to Bama. Like, there are scenarios. It won't be so much up to UCF. It's really going to be a war of attrition between the Power 5 teams.
You had to do a lot of talking there to explain that path, Emmanuel. I mean, that's
exactly.
I'm telling you. I mean, a 2-loss LSU is going to be above a UCF. A 1-loss Notre Dame is going to be above a UCF. I'm with Jonathan here, but I like the picture of hope that you're painting there.
At least
UCF.
we're trying, Shake. I believe in UCF, man. We're trying.
Hey.
Get them
Look,
in.
they may not be one of the 4 best teams, but they deserve a system where they can prove whether or not they are. How about that for the soapbox
100%.
there here on College Football Live? Coming up next here on College Football Live, as NFL jobs open up, there's always speculation about college coaches making the jump. Which current coaches fit the NFL bill?
Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott, and the boys welcome Amari Cooper as they face Marcus Mariota and the Titans. Monday Night Football, Titans-Cowboys, Monday at 8:15 on ESPN.
This Heisman Update is brought to you by Nissan, premier partner of the Heisman Trophy.
Now a look at a Heisman Update brought to you by Nissan. Tua Tagovailoa still atop the list, but he'll get a big test this weekend against third-ranked LSU, which has forced 4 turnovers in each of the last 2 games. Tua's next INT will be his first of the season. Meanwhile, Kyler Murray, second in the Heisman race, got a good opportunity to add to the numbers facing Texas Tech and its 117th ranked pass defense. Kyler Murray's head coach, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, had to answer some questions this week about speculation about a potential move to the NFL now that Cleveland job has opened up. Jonathan, we have seen some notable college head coaches struggle in the NFL. Even Nick Saban had a losing season before going to Alabama from the Miami Dolphins. Why do you think that is, JV?
Well, for 2 reasons, Schick. The first is the relationship of the player and the coach. They're used to dealing with 18-year-old kids as opposed to grown men who have been around a lot of football, and it's hard for some of the coaches to adjust. The second, and what's always stuck with me, is Sean Payton saying, as you get older, it's not about the scheme. It's about the players that run your scheme. And a lot of the young coaches, they try to come in and put this new scheme and think that it's not about the players as opposed to having the players adjust to what's going on.
JV, you're exactly right. Chip Kelly came in 2013 to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles traded for me in 2013, so I got there 2 months after Chip, and he had a saying, culture beats scheme, and he also said that culture can beat talent. Well, in the NFL, you need some talent. At the end of the day, your culture and your scheme, all that stuff is great, but it helps to have Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, etc. College coaches typically don't understand that. Yes, you can take the league by storm, which Chip did, but ultimately all of that will fade away eventually. It's just a different learning gap.
Just makes you wonder why any coach at a good college job would leave for the NFL unless, of course, you hate recruiting. College Football Live, Emmanuel, JV, thanks, guys. See ya Friday.